Under the tall glass tower where the nightlights blinked like tired stars, a janitor pushed his cart through the quiet halls. The sound of his mop sliding across the marble echoed like soft whispers in an empty church. The air smelled of cleaning, soap, and loneliness. He was old. His name was Mr. Lee, and his hands moved slow but careful, like he was afraid of breaking the silence around him. The whole building was asleep, except for him and the lights that never went out. He hummed a tune from far away, a song that no one in this city knew. And then he whispered something under his breath in Mandarin. The language rolled off his tongue like a secret prayer to a ghost. Upstairs, behind a half-open glass door, someone stopped moving. Her name was Lena. She was the CEO's daughter, known for her cold face and sharp voice. Everyone feared her because she never smiled. But tonight her face was different, her eyes wide, her heart beating faster than the ticking clock. She heard it clearly, voice speaking in her mother's language, a language she had not heard since she was a little girl, when her mother used to sing her to sleep before she passed away. Lena stood frozen, wondering who the janitor was, and how he knew those words. She crept closer, her soft steps almost soundless against the carpet. She peeked through the gap in the door and saw him bent over the floor, whispering again. The words sounded sad, heavy, like they carried a story that no one else could bear to tell. She couldn't catch them all, but she knew one word. It was her mother's name, a name she hadn't spoken in years. Her breath caught in her throat. She felt her chest tighten. Was it a coincidence or something more? Her mind raced. How could this old janitor know that name? Why now? Why here? She wanted to call out to him, but something inside told her to wait, to listen, to understand before she revealed herself. Mr. Lee stopped mopping for a moment. He looked at the reflection of himself in the polished floor, his eyes tired but calm. His lips moved again, speaking softly in Mandarin, words that sounded like sorrow mixed with hope. He said something about forgiveness, something about a promise that could not be broken. He said he missed someone and that he was sorry and that he would make it right. One day his voice trembled slightly, and then he sighed and kept mopping as if nothing had happened, but Lena's heart was no longer calm. She felt a storm rising inside her chest. The building lights flickered once, twice. The wind outside howled softly against the tall windows. Lena stepped out of her office, her heels barely making a sound. She walked down the hallway, following him quietly. Every few steps she heard him whisper again. The same rhythm. The same emotion. It felt like the words were pulling her closer. She could not stop herself. She followed until he turned into the service corridor where no one ever went. She hid behind a corner and watched him. The janitor placed his mop against the wall and took a small photograph from his pocket. The light above him was dim, but she could see enough. It was a picture of a young woman smiling in front of the company's logo. He touched the picture gently, his hands shaking, and whispered, again the same name, the one that had belonged to her mother. Lena felt chills run down her spine. She leaned closer, trying to hear more, but then her phone buzzed loudly in her hand. The sound echoed through the hallway like thunder. Mr. Lee turned, around his eyes sharp, his face surprised. Their eyes met for the first time, and for a moment neither of them moved. Lena's voice caught in her throat. She wanted to speak, but the words were stuck. The janitor looked at her for a long time and then smiled faintly. It was a sad kind of smile, the kind that hides too many memories. He bowed slightly and said something again in Mandarin, softly, slowly, like a man speaking to the wind. Lena understood only half of it, but one line burned into her heart. He said, "I didn't mean for it to end this way." She wanted to ask what he meant, but before she could, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the stairwell, leaving only the faint sound of his footsteps and the whisper of his language echoing behind. Lena stood there frozen, her thoughts tangled like threads. She could still hear her mother's voice in her head. The same tone, the same language, the same melody she whispered once long ago in the hospital bed before she died. Lena felt tears in her eyes. She had spent years trying to forget her mother, trying to act strong in front of her father who never spoke of the past, but now everything came flooding back. She could not understand why this janitor knew the same words, why he said her mother's name, why he sounded so full of regret. When she finally moved again, the halls were empty, the lights dimmer than before. She walked slowly back to her office, her mind heavy with questions. Who was this man? What did he mean by those words, and how did he know her mother's name? She sat down by her desk, staring at the reflection of the city in the glass. The sky was beginning to turn gray. The first sign of dawn. She whispered the same name again under her breath, the name that had been sleeping in her memory for years. And in that quiet moment she promised herself she would find out who Mr. Li really was, and why his whispers in Mandarin felt like they were meant for her. The morning light crept through the tall, glass windows, painting silver lines across the office floor. The city below was already alive, but inside the tower, the air felt heavy, as if the night had left something behind, something that refused to fade. Lena walked into the lobby. Her steps, quiet, her face unreadable. She looked calm, but her mind was burning with questions. The janitor, Mr. Li, moved near the corner, his gray uniform blending with the dull walls, his cart full of buckets and rags, his eyes down, like always, as if the world around him did not exist. But when he turned for a second, their eyes met again, and in that short moment, Lena felt that strange chill return. She walked past him, pretending not to notice, pretending to be the cold daughter everyone feared but her. Heart raced faster with each step. She wanted to stop him, ask him who he was, ask him why he spoke her mother's name. But something held her back. Fear. Curiosity. Maybe both. She went straight to her office, but she could not focus. The words from last night still echoed in her head. I didn't mean for it to end this way. She looked at the photo of her mother on her desk, her soft smile frozen in time, her eyes kind and warm. Lena whispered to the photo. What did he mean? What ended and why? Hours. Past meetings came and went. People spoke numbers and projects, but none of it reached her ears. She waited until the office grew quiet again, until most of the workers had gone home. Only the faint hum of the cleaning machines echoed through the halls. Then she stood up and walked to the janitor's closet, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She opened the door and saw Mr. Li arranging bottles on a shelf. He looked up, slightly surprised but not afraid, his eyes gentle yet full of stories. Lena spoke first, her voice low but firm. Last night you said something in Mandarin, she said slowly, and you said my mother's name. How do you know it? Mr. Li froze. His hands stopped moving. He took a deep breath and then turned toward her, his voice soft but steady. You understand Mandarin? He asked. She nodded a little. Not well, she said, just enough to know you said her name. He smiled faintly, a sad kind of smile. Your mother, he said. I knew her once, a long time ago. Lena's heart skipped. She stepped closer. What do you mean you knew her? He looked down at the floor, his hands gripping the edge of the cart as if it kept him standing. She helped me once, he said, when I was still young, when life was harder than it is now. I never forgot her. She was kind and strong like the sun. She always spoke with hope even when she was sad. She helped me get this job years ago, when no one else would. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Her mother had worked in charity before marrying her father. She had always helped people quietly without telling anyone. So you worked here because of her? She asked. Yes. He said she trusted this place. She thought it was honest. But things changed after she left, after your father took full control of the company. Lena frowned. What are you saying? He looked up, his eyes tired. Your mother believed this company could do good, but not everyone shared her dream. Some people used it for their own gain, and those who saw too much disappeared. He said slowly, like someone who had practiced hiding pain. Lena felt the ground shift beneath her words, like that did not belong in the bright, perfect world she grew up in. Disappear, she repeated, her voice shaking. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. He reached into his pocket and took out the same photo she had seen last night, the girl in the picture smiling in front of the company logo. This is my daughter, he said quietly. She worked here 3 years ago as an intern. She found something she should not have. She went missing a week later. The air between them grew cold. Lena's lips trembled. Are you saying my father? He looked away. I am not saying anything. I have no proof. but I know my daughter would never run away. She loved her work. She loved this place. She said she had found something big, something that would change everything, and then she was gone. Lena's knees felt weak. She leaned against the door. The truth sounded too heavy, too wild, yet something deep inside whispered that it could be real. She had seen how her father reacted to secrets, how quickly he shut down anything that threatened his power. What did she find? She asked, her voice trembling. Mr. Lee shook his head. I don't know. Only that it had something to do with the money, something hidden behind fake reports. She told me she was going to tell someone, but she never came home. Lena's eyes filled with tears. She thought of her father sitting in his glass office, smiling in front of cameras, giving speeches about honesty and success, a mask she now saw clearly for the first time. Mr. Lee's voice softened again. I never wanted to drag you into this, but when I saw you last night and heard your voice, I thought maybe she was right. Maybe there is still someone here who can make things right. His eyes met hers, filled with both sadness and trust. Lena took a shaky breath and said, Tell me everything you remember. Mr. Lee nodded slowly and said, I will. But only if you promise me one thing. Promise me you will. Be careful, this place is not what it seems. Lena felt her pulse racing, but she nodded. I promise, she said softly. Mr. Lee looked out the small window at the city lights flickering below and whispered in Mandarin the same words from last night. A quiet prayer that hung in the air between them this time. Lena whispered back her reply in the same language, her voice trembling but strong. And for the first time that night, he looked at her with something like hope. The night air was cold and heavy as the city lights blinked far below. The tall glass tower stood like a sleeping giant, its windows glowing faintly like tired eyes. Lena sat alone in her office, staring at the photograph Mr. Lee had given her. The picture of his daughter, the girl who once worked here and vanished without a trace. Her mind was full of noise, questions turning and twisting like restless shadows. She could not stop thinking about what Mr. Lee said about secrets, about danger, about people who disappeared. She wanted to believe it was just an old man's grief, but something in his eyes told her it was real. Down the hallway, she heard the soft hum of the cleaning machines again. The familiar rhythm that followed every night. She stood up, her heart heavy with fear and curiosity. She walked out into the corridor. The lights flickered slightly, casting long shapes on the walls. She saw Mr. Lee near the far end, wiping down the glass doors. His movements slow and careful as always. But tonight there was something different about him. He looked older, more tired, as if the memories were finally too heavy to carry. She approached him quietly. Mr. Lee, she said, her voice calm but firm. We need to talk again. He looked up, his eyes sad but warm. I knew you would come, he said quietly, and then added, I found something she left behind before she disappeared. Lena's breath caught. She followed him as he pushed his cart down the narrow corridor and opened the small storage room where no one ever went. Inside, it smelled of old wood dust and bleach. He closed the door behind them and reached under a pile of rags, pulling out a small metal box. He placed it on the table between them and whispered, She hid this here before she went missing. I never dared to open it until now, but maybe it's time. Lena's hands trembled slightly as she helped him lift the lid inside. There were papers, old files, and a small flash drive wrapped in tape. She picked up one of the papers, and her eyes widened. It was an internal report full of numbers and signatures, lines of money being moved from one account to another through fake names, fake companies, fake projects. Her father's name appeared in the margins, written in bold. She felt her chest tighten. She whispered, This can't be real, but Mr. Lee nodded. It is, he said softly. She told me she found proof that someone at the top was stealing money from the company and using it for illegal deals. She said she wanted to tell the authorities. I told her to be careful, but she was brave too. Brave. Lena stared at the papers, her fingers shaking, her father's handwriting stared back at her like a ghost from the past. She whispered, Why would he do this? He has everything. Power, money, respect. Why would he risk it? Mr. Lee looked at her quietly and said, Sometimes power is never enough for those who already have it. He sighed and looked away. My daughter thought she could stop them. But she didn't understand how deep the roots went, Lena felt. Tears in her eyes, she closed the box and looked at him. What do we do now? He paused, then said, we need to copy the files before someone finds out they still exist. Lena nodded, her voice firm. I can use my access card. We'll save everything to a secure drive tonight before sunrise. We'll have proof. They moved quickly through the empty halls, their footsteps light like thieves in a temple. Every sound echoed louder in the stillness of the night. When they reached her office, Lena plugged in the flash drive. The screen glowed cold and blue. The files opened, and line by line the truth appeared. Contracts, fake invoices, names she had never seen but somehow recognized from her father's meetings. She copied everything to a new drive, her hands shaking with every click. Then suddenly the door handle moved. Both of them froze. A voice echoed from the other side. Lena, are you still here? It was her father, his deep, calm tone that always filled the room with authority. She panicked, pulling the drive from the port and hiding it inside her jacket. Mr. Lee stepped back into the shadows as the door opened. The CEO stepped in, his eyes sharp and curious. I didn't expect you here this late, he said, his voice smooth and cold. Lena forced a small smile. Just finishing some work, she said, trying to sound calm. Her father looked around, his gaze landing on the open files on her screen. His expression changed slightly, his tone darker. Where did you get these, he asked. She hesitated, then said, I found them while cleaning old reports. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. These are confidential, he said slowly, his voice now like ice. Delete them right now. Lena's heart raced, but she said, I can't, not until you tell me what this is. He stared at her for a long moment, then said, you wouldn't understand. The world isn't as simple as you think. His hand reached toward the keyboard, but she stepped in front of it, blocking his way. Behind him, Mr. Lee remained hidden in the dark, watching every move, his jaw tight with anger and fear. The CEO turned to leave, but before he did, he said one last thing. Don't dig where you shouldn't, Lena. It won't end well for you or anyone else. Then he walked out. His footsteps fading down the hall, Lena stood still, trembling. She turned to Mr. Lee, who stepped out of the shadows, his face pale. We can't stop now, she said. He nodded. I know, but now they'll be watching us. They left the office together, the night outside, quiet but tense, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Lena clutched the flash drive against her chest, her heart beating fast. She whispered to herself, I have to know everything, no matter what it costs. And somewhere deep in the shadows of the tower, a camera light blinked red, unseen, recording everything as the janitor and the CEO's daughter disappeared into the night, carrying secrets that could destroy everything. The morning sun rose behind thick gray clouds, washing the city in pale light. The tall glass tower looked colder than ever, its walls reflecting nothing but silence. Lena stood by her window, staring at the streets below, her mind spinning faster than her heart. She had not slept all night. The flash drive sat in her hand, small and warm. From her grip, inside it were the secrets her father had buried deep under the name of success. The proof that could destroy everything he had built, and everything she had believed in her whole life. The door opened quietly, and Mr. Lee entered, his eyes tired but alert. He carried his mop and bucket as if he were just another worker cleaning another day, but behind that calm face there was fire. He closed the door slowly and whispered, They are already looking for us. Lena turned sharply. What do you mean? He said. Someone came asking questions this morning. 2 men in black suits. They went through the storage room. They took the old box. I hid the papers somewhere else last night. Thank heaven I did. Lena's heart pounded faster. She felt a rush of fear and guilt mixed together like poison. She walked to her desk, her voice trembling. We need to make copies. We need to keep the evidence safe. Mr. Lee nodded. Yes, but not here, he said. They have eyes everywhere in this building. I have a friend who still works at the old bank across the street. We can hide it there for now. Lena hesitated. Her father's office was just 2 floors above them. He might already know something was missing. She looked at the flash drive again and said, Let's go now before it's too late. They moved quickly through the hallways, pretending to talk about cleaning supplies every time someone passed by. Lena forced a smile, even though her hands were shaking when they reached the back elevator. Mr. Li pressed the button and whispered softly in Mandarin, something that sounded like a prayer for protection. Lena didn't fully understand, but it calmed her for a moment. The elevator doors closed slowly, sealing them inside. The hum of the machinery filled the silence. She looked at her reflection in the metal wall. She barely recognized herself. Her eyes tired, her face pale. She was no longer just the CEO's daughter. She was a daughter searching for truth. When they stepped out into the underground parking lot, the air smelled of gasoline and dust. Shadows stretched long under the flickering lights. They walked fast, keeping their heads low. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind them. They froze. 2 guards turned the corner. One of them spoke. "Miss Lena, what are you doing down here?" She forced a nervous laugh. "I just came to check the maintenance area. My father asked me to." He frowned. "Your father asked about you earlier." He seemed worried. Lena smiled again, pretending calm. "Tell him I'll be upstairs soon," she said, and walked away, pulling Mr. Li toward the exit, her pulse racing. Outside, the air felt different, free but dangerous. The city noise surrounded them, but it could not hide the fear in her chest. They crossed the street to the old bank building, an abandoned place with dusty windows and faded signs. Mr. Li's friend, an old clerk with kind eyes, let them in through the back door. He led them to a small storage room full of old papers and broken furniture. "Here. No one will find it," he said quietly. Lena handed him the flash drive. "Please keep it safe," she said. "If something happens to us, give this to the police." The man nodded. "I will." As they left the bank, Lena felt a strange chill, like someone was watching her. She turned, but saw only the crowd, moving like waves, people rushing, cars honking, everything ordinary. Yet her gut whispered danger. She looked at Mr. Li, his face calm, but she could see the same unease in his eyes. They walked toward the tower again, neither speaking. The weight of secrets hung between them. When they reached the entrance, Lena stopped and said, "I can't face him yet." Mr. Li looked at her gently. "You will have to one day, but not now. Gather your strength first." Hours passed. The day dragged on, the tension growing thicker. Every minute when the evening came, her father called her into his office, his tone polite but cold. She entered the room slowly, the air heavy with the smell of expensive perfume and lies. He sat behind his desk, his face unreadable. He said, "I heard you were in the archives last night. Care to explain?" She met his eyes, trying not to show fear. "I was cleaning up some old reports," she said. He smiled thinly. "Really? Because I checked the logs, and it seems someone accessed restricted files last night. Someone using your ID card." Lena's heart skipped. She said maybe it was a system error. He stood up, walking slowly around his desk, his eyes sharp like blades. "Lena, I know you're hiding something, and I hope you understand that curiosity can be dangerous, especially in this company." His voice smooth but deadly. She wanted to shout, wanted to accuse him, wanted to ask about the missing girl. But she stayed silent. He leaned closer and whispered, "Some truths should stay buried." Then he smiled and said softly, "Dinner at home tonight, don't be late." When she left the room, her legs felt weak. She could barely breathe. She walked to the restroom, locked the door, and splashed water on her face. Her reflection stared back, pale and trembling. She whispered to herself, "I can't stop now. Not after everything I've seen." She dried her hands and stepped out, finding Mr. Li waiting near the corner, his face tense. He said quietly, "They know it's you. We need to leave soon." Lena looked around the hall. The lights seemed brighter, the air colder, everything suddenly dangerous. She nodded. "Let's finish this tonight." As they walked together down the empty corridor, the night began to fall again. The city lights outside flickering like fading stars. She could feel the walls closing in around her, secrets pressing against her like invisible hands. She thought of her mother, of her kindness, of her belief that goodness could survive even among power and greed. Lena looked at Mr. Li and whispered, in Mandarin, the same words he once said: forgiveness, hope, and truth. Her voice shook but carried strength, and as the two of them disappeared into the shadows of the tower, a new storm was already rising above them. The night fell fast, wrapping the Tall glass tower in quiet darkness, the streets outside glowed with yellow lights and the wind whispered against the windows. Lena sat in her office alone, her hands trembling slightly over the desk. Her heart heavy with the weight of everything. She had learned her father's lies, the missing girl, the stolen money, it was all too much. Yet she knew it was far from over. She could not run now. She had to face the truth, even if it broke her completely. The door opened softly, and Mr. Lee stepped. In his uniform darkened by the dim light, his eyes tired but full of quiet strength. He closed the door behind him and said in a low voice, "They are watching you. The guards are not real guards. They work for your father." Lena looked up, fear flickering. In her eyes she whispered, "What do they know?" He shook his head enough to be dangerous. He said, "They are searching every room. I had to hide in the stairwell before coming here." Lena stood up and walked to the window, staring down at the city. The reflection of her own face staring back at her looked like a stranger. She turned back, her voice trembling. "We can't stay here any longer. We need to finish this tonight," she said. Mr. Lee nodded slowly. "Yes, but we must be careful." He said, "If they catch us, we may not get another chance." He placed a folded piece of paper on her desk and whispered, "This is the name of someone who can help. She used to work with my daughter. She knows the truth, but she is scared to speak. She lives near the old market on the east side." Lena looked at the paper, the name written in careful letters, Mei Hua, she repeated softly. Mr. Lee nodded. "She was my daughter's closest friend. If anyone can confirm what really happened, it is her." They waited until the building was almost empty, the lights dimmed and the elevator silent before leaving. They took the back stairs, moving like shadows through the empty halls. Every sound felt louder, every echo a warning. When they reached the ground floor, they saw two men standing near the exit, their eyes scanning the corridor. Lena froze. Mr. Lee touched her arm, whispering, "Stay calm. They will not expect us to go through the maintenance tunnel." He led her to a narrow metal door, hidden behind stacks of old boxes. They slipped inside, closing it quietly behind them. The air inside was cold and smelled of rust and dust. They walked through the dark tunnel, their footsteps echoing softly against the metal walls. Lena's heart raced, but she kept moving, holding her phone flashlight in front of her. When they finally reached the other end, they pushed open a small hatch and climbed out into the alley behind the building. The city noise surrounded them again. Cars honking, distant voices, the sound of life continuing while their world felt like it was falling apart. They walked fast, keeping their heads down until they reached the old market. The place was nearly empty. Only a few stalls left open under flickering lights. They found the small shop. Mr. Lee described an old herbal store with faded red signs and jars filled with strange powders. A woman sat behind the counter, her face lined with age and worry. She looked up as they entered, and her eyes widened when she saw Mr. Lee. She whispered, "You shouldn't have come here. It's not safe." He stepped closer, his voice gentle. "I had to Hua. It's time to tell the truth." The woman looked at Lena, then back at him. "Truth," she said quietly. "The truth will destroy everything." He nodded it already. Has Lena stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Please tell me what happened to your friend, what happened to Mei Li." The woman hesitated, tears filling her eyes. She said softly, "Your father found out she was investigating the fake accounts. She tried to warn people, but no one listened. One night she was called into his office. She never came back the next day. The company said she resigned, but I knew she wouldn't leave without telling me. She said she had hidden copies of everything on a drive somewhere safe." Lena's heart pounded. She whispered, "Where is it?" The woman shook her head. "I don't know. But she mentioned the word roots before she disappeared. Roots. Maybe that means something." Mr. Lee closed his eyes, pain washing over his face. "My daughter always loved that word," he said. "She used to say the truth has roots. It always grows back, no matter how deep they bury it." Lena turned to him, her voice steady. "Maybe that's where she hid it, somewhere, connected to the company's roots, the old records, the main server room," she said suddenly. "That's it. The server room, it's called Project Roots in the files I saw last night. It stores all backup data. We can find it there." Before they could move, the sound of footsteps echoed from outside. Men's voices shouting. Mr. Lee grabbed Lena's hand. "Run," he said. They rushed through the back door into another alley. The cold wind cutting against their faces, the footsteps grew louder. They turned corner after corner until they reached a narrow street full of smoke and noise. Lena gasped for air, her legs shaking. They hid behind an old car, waiting as the men ran past, shouting into their radios. Mr. Lee looked at her and whispered, "We can't stop now. This is our only chance." They moved through the night, heading back toward the tower, their bodies tired but their minds burning with purpose. The truth was close and the danger closer. Lena felt her heart beating in rhythm with every step, the image of her mother flashing in her mind. Her mother's gentle voice telling her to always do what is right even when it hurts. As they approached the tower again, its lights looked brighter, sharper like eyes watching from above. Lena whispered softly, "This ends tonight." Mr. Lee nodded, his face set with quiet resolve, and together, they walked toward the doors, knowing the next few hours would change everything forever. The wind howled through the empty streets as the tall glass tower loomed above like a silent giant, its windows glowing pale under the city lights. Lena stood at the entrance, her hands shaking but her eyes full of fire beside her. Mr. Lee breathed heavily, his face pale yet steady. They both knew this was it. The final night, the truth buried for years, was about to rise again, like a ghost that refused to stay dead. The air felt heavy, thick with fear and courage mixed together. Lena whispered softly, "This is where it ends." Mr. Lee nodded, his voice low. "Yes, where it all began." They slipped inside through the side door, the lobby dark, and still the guards, nowhere to be seen. Every sound echoed against the marble walls like a warning. The elevator was locked, so they took the stairs, climbing quickly, each step harder than the last. The higher they went, the stronger. The fear grew, but neither stopped. When they reached the top floor, the lights flickered as if the building itself knew what was coming. They entered the server room, the air cool and humming with the sound of machines. The faint blue glow from the monitors painted their faces in pale light. Lena pulled out the second flash drive and whispered, "This is it. We find the hidden files and expose everything." Mr. Lee nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he typed on the keyboard. The screen flashed rows of code lines of hidden names and transactions. Her father's name appeared again and again, proof of everything he had done. She copied the data quickly. Her heart racing, every second felt like thunder in her ears. Then the door burst open, the sound like a gunshot echoing through the room. Her father stood there, his face dark and cold. Two men behind him. Lena froze, her breath caught in her throat. Her father's voice was calm too. "Calm, put it down, Lena," he said. "You don't understand what you are doing." She stepped back, clutching the drive tighter in her hand. "I understand enough," she said. "You lied to everyone, you ruined lives, including his daughter." He looked at Mr. Lee, who stood firm behind her, his eyes full of quiet hate. The CEO's expression changed slightly. A flicker of guilt, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "You think you can destroy everything I built with one file," he said, his voice sharp and cruel. Lena's voice shook, but she didn't back down. "It's not about what you built," she said. "It's about who you destroyed." Her father sighed and nodded to the men behind him. They stepped forward, but before they could move, Mr. Lee shouted in Mandarin a word that echoed through the room like thunder. It made them stop just for a second, enough for Lena to run to the console and hit send. The files began uploading to the company's public server, the progress bar glowing across the screen. Her father shouted, "Stop her." The men lunged forward. One grabbed Mr. Lee and threw him against the wall, but the old man fought back with all the strength he had, his eyes burning with a fire that came from years of pain. The other man reached for Lena, but she kicked the desk, sending the keyboard flying. Sparks burst from the wires. She pressed one last key and the upload hit 100%. The screen flashed complete, and for a moment everything went still. The CEO stared at the monitor, his face pale as the truth went live across every employee computer, every phone, every news feed in the city, his empire collapsing before his eyes. He turned toward her, his voice breaking. "Do you know what you've done? You destroyed everything your mother wanted." Lena looked at him, her voice calm. "You already did that years ago." The guards rushed out as alarms began to blare, red lights flashing across the floor. The police would come soon, the whole city would know the truth. Mr. Li struggled to stand, his breathing heavy but his eyes shining with relief. He looked at Lena and whispered in Mandarin. "It's over." She helped him to his feet. Her hands shaking, tears running down her cheeks, she said, "We did it." He smiled faintly. "Yes. My daughter can finally rest now outside." The sirens grew louder, filling the night with a cold echo of justice. Her father stood motionless, his empire broken. His lies exposed, he looked older, smaller than ever before. He whispered something she almost couldn't hear. She wanted to save the company. I just wanted to protect it. But Lena only shook her head and said, "Sometimes protecting means destroying what's wrong." The police burst through the door shouting orders. The guards were taken away and her father was handcuffed. His face empty, his eyes hollow as they led him away. Lena stood still, watching him disappear down the hall, her chest heavy with sadness and relief mixed together. Mr. Li put a hand on her shoulder, his voice soft. "You were brave like your mother. She would be proud of you." Lena smiled weakly and whispered, "Maybe now she can rest too." As dawn began to rise, the city glowed golden through the windows, the chaos fading into silence again. Lena and Mr. Li stood together in the quiet server room, the hum of machines steady and calm for the first time in years. She felt free. She turned to him and said, "What will you do now?" He looked out at the rising sun and said, "Go home. Finally say goodbye to my daughter's grave." She nodded, then reached into her pocket and gave him the flash drive. "Keep it safe," she said. "It's her story too." He took it, gently, his eyes shining with tears. They walked out together down the empty corridor, the morning light spilling through the glass like hope reborn. The tower no longer looked powerful. It looked tired, old, hollow, a monument to secrets now destroyed. Outside, the streets were waking up, people reading headlines, their eyes wide with shock. The truth spreading faster than the sunrise. Lena stopped by the door, looked back one last time, and whispered softly in Mandarin the same words Mr. Li once said: "Forgiveness, hope, and truth." Then she turned and walked away into the morning light, leaving behind the building that once held all her pain.